My good friend and YouTuber Nigel Barros invited me onto his podcast, and together we shared our tips for filmmakers. They range from simple gear recommendations to things that I've personally learned this year as a filmmaker. I thought this was such good advice that I wanted to share a condensed version of the podcast here on YouTube just for you guys. So, let's dive straight into it.
You were saying that we should give like 3 filmmaking tips. So I'm going to let you go first.
Okay. My first tip, and this is a tip that I actually learned just this year. I was working in a new environment at my work, and I was trying to figure out why isn't certain things I'm trying to communicate just not getting through. It feels like I'm not being heard or listened to. And I was talking to a friend, and he was basically explaining to me, you got to learn to over communicate. A lot of people, they don't communicate enough, and I realized this with even just my humble years working. I haven't worked in the working industry that long, but I've already, come to learn that there's not a lot of communication that goes on, and even if you think you are communicating enough, chances are you're not. And so learning to over communicate, and yeah, it may sound a little tedious, but the better you can understand and have clarity of what's expected of you and also what you're trying to express to someone really depends on just that first communication.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I feel like your tips are going to be way more beneficial than mine. Mine are all like gear related. Yeah, no, I mean.
Well, there we go. It's a nice blend.
Yeah. I mean, just to touch on your tip, I haven't really been in any situations probably like you have. I mean, I have, but like it's been such a long time. I do very, very small projects, and then I make YouTube videos. But the only way that I've tried, like the one thing that I have done that has like been really beneficial for me is when I am working with people that maybe aren't filmmakers, is I always try to do some type of mood board or treatment or whatever that's like in very layman's terms and not like filmmaker terms. So I can send it to them, and so they'll kind of get like an idea of like, okay, this is what he's trying to do. So
I love that idea because people learn differently. Some people are more visual. Like I am certainly one of those visual people. You may describe something to me in a concept, but if there's a lack of visuals, it's really hard for me to fully understand.
Yeah. Well, my first tip, your light modifier is way more important than the light itself. That's like one of like the biggest questions that I get is like, hey, is this light good, or which light should I buy? What's the good first light? The difference is so small that like it's really not going to matter that much. But what I think is like one of the biggest things is your modifier. And I'm a huge, I talk a lot about like the Photech soft lighter. That's what I tell everybody, like, hey, if you just want one lighting modifier, that one's going to give you like the softest, most pleasing light. And it's like my favorite one. Just get whatever light you can afford. The Godox SL60 is great if you are going to be in a studio and you don't need anything battery powered. Turn your attention more towards your lighting modifier, because that's what's really going to make your images look the way that you want them to look. And if you want them to look like, like my A-roll stuff, I've been pretty happy with the Photech soft lighter. And I mean, like most soft boxes will do a pretty good job, but I always like that the light bounces from the reflective umbrella and then it bounces back through a layer diffusion, and it like double diffuses it.
It's almost like a book
I just feel like
light,
it breaks up all the lighting particles really, really nicely, and it just kind of falls on your face. So that's my first tip, is basically just get a Photech soft lighter and don't worry about your light too much.
Well, that's what I like about your channel, is like you can show there's different ways of using gear. I've literally went to the dollar store, picked up a shower curtain for $1.25. It is now. It's not $1 anymore.
And the $1.25.
Yep. And I've used that on commercials, literally. And man, like it just breaks up the light so beautifully. So for $1.25, you can get some incredible soft quality of light.
Well, cool. What's your second filmmaking tip?
My next tip is to value your personal projects. You can easily get caught up in the work side of things that you forget to work on a personal project. And I would argue that you really need to value that. It's easier to show people, hey, this is something that I've worked on, or this is what I'm currently working on. I have concepts for this. Because then people are going to be interested in what you are passionate about. And so you might be working with client A, they have a wedding, and then suddenly he's a content producer and maybe he does music. And suddenly he finds out that you want to do music videos. Well, there's a collaboration right there. And stuff like that happens all the time. Once people find out that that's the stuff you work on, well, it's going to be a cycle where you now put out this one thing and people find that interesting, and that will lead your work to where you ultimately want to go. Not only for the sake of leading to more fulfilling projects, but also as a creative outlet. Because you can easily burnt out if you are not loving what you do. It will reinvigorate you and keep you excited about other work as well. It's healthy overall to value your own personal projects.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that that's like, something, I forget who said it, but it's like you have to make the work that you want to do in the future. So it's like, if you're constantly shooting weddings and you're only putting that out there, you're probably only going to get hired for weddings, but it's like if you want to shoot music videos, you might have to like do some personal projects, some free music videos,
Right.
and get those out there, because that's what you really want to do. You need to like, build that portfolio up. And that's something that like I've really been wanting to double down on, is do a lot more personal projects. There was this photographer, his name is Joey Lawrence, and he basically built his whole career off of going out in like these crazy locations and making like these portrait series, and it like led him to be like, he's one of like the biggest like a high fashion portrait photographer out there now. And it's just like, okay, take like skateboarding for instance. Like if I really want to be like a skateboarding filmmaker and like do that more, then I'm gonna have to like actually start doing my own personal projects, which is something that like I'm hoping to do in the next coming year. We'll see. But yeah, no, I like that.
And
tip
it's hard, especially, if you have a family to provide for. But I think I would just encourage you, like, that's why it's even more important, because no one's going to ever have more time, So it's you got to start now, and especially for those young people just getting into it, just do whatever you can to start working towards that. If that's something you truly want to do, don't waste time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is your next tip?
My next tip is yet again another gear related
I like it.
tip.
It's gear and then just super like life changing.
Yeah. Well, my next tip is to don't sleep on using LUTs for your monitor. I've been using custom LUTs on my video monitor for like these last few projects that I've done, and it's been insanely helpful for me, because it not only helps me like expose better and get my white balance like dialed in perfectly, it also kind of like gives me a little bit of a feeling of like what the video is going to look like. Recently I shot this little running sequence with my buddy Jake, and it was not only helpful just to like expose for that whole sequence, but when I was like showing it to him, he could kind of like see that like the colors weren't just all like washed out and gross, because I was shooting in log. There are so many like cheap monitors that can do it right now. I mean, I just did a review on the OCT5 Plus, which is like a bright monitor that's also cheap, and you can put LUTs on it. And so that's just something that's like that I've been using recently, that like has just been like the forefront of my mind, like, oh, don't sleep on using LUTs on your monitor.
I think that's the biggest thing. Like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I find like just having a nice monitor on your rig and just with a nice LUT, you feel so much more confident shooting, just because you get that immediate reaction. Oh yeah, it looks amazing. Sometimes when you're filming and you don't have that, or you're looking on a tiny screen, you kind of like, is this focused? Is it properly exposed?
Yeah. What's your third tip?
So my third tip is to have many income sources. Don't rely on one. And the best example of this is if you were to build a coffee table with one leg, that thing is going to tip over.
Yeah.
If you build it with two legs, it's still going to kind of tip over. It might stand for a bit. 3 legs, well, if you're in a tripod situation, it will work. But if you have 4 legs, you're better off. So think about that as terms of multiple ways you can generate income. And so a couple ideas for that is, maybe you do have your 9 to 5. Well, that is one, but you're always at risk of, being let go, or something happens and, you're out. I want to do a side hustle. And if you can put in the time and effort to make something like a YouTube channel, then that is a second way of generating income. And then from there, you can not only rely on the AdSense, but you can rely on affiliate marketing. That's a second income source. Then you go and you build an audience, and now you can do a Patreon. That's a fourth income source. You don't have to stop there. You can create digital products and sell those. Once people, they're requesting for other stuff, you can combine a nice course or create digital LUTs and sell those. And there, you're at 5 income sources already. And maybe you take the odd freelance gig every now and then. Then there's 6 income sources. So try to think
Yeah.
about building as many income sources, and it doesn't have to be necessarily within the YouTube niche. Maybe you can hit up garage sales on the weekends, buy stuff, flip it on eBay. That's something I did some when I was, 12 years old. Buy use sports equipment, trade it in at Play It Again Sports, sell that. That's something. Even if you make $100 on a weekend, that might be just enough to help you get a bit further. So that would be my main point, is just don't rely on one income source and try to figure out how to get as many others, just in case when one of those legs get knocked down, you can be still standing.
Yeah, no, dude, that's a great tip. And that's something that like has been a huge thing that I've had to focus on being like a YouTuber now, is like I think I have like 7 or 8 income sources. Like some obviously are going to bring in a lot more than others, but
and don't neglect the small ones either.
No.
A friend told me about, hey, you can actually sign up for multiple Amazon stores. So not only the US, but you could do the UK, Germany. If you use a tool like Genius Link, it does cost a little bit of money. That has well paid for itself, I'll tell you. Just because, you'll get random ones like from Canada or US, and there's an extra $100 randomly. So don't even neglect the small little income streams that you can do that's easy enough and maybe takes an hour to set up. That's money that you're missing out on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and even I haven't really like dived into, but it's like another way that like I know that a lot of filmmakers who have pretty nice gear make a little bit of extra side money, is just like renting out their gear on ShareGrid or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of different options. If it was like all of my revenue streams were running dry, like I would be flipping stuff on eBay. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I do that right now with camera gear. Like
pretty much,
I'll buy it. When I see like a GH4, the bidding is at like, $185 and there's like 2 hours to go. Sometimes I'll just bid, and if I win it, then I'll just resell it. You know what I mean? Like, because I know that I can get like, I'll just take better pictures of it and I'll get, $300 or $400 out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's something I definitely kind of did earlier when I got started. Now, I don't mess around with it as much, but even still, I try to be frugal what camera gear I buy. So instead of buying a camera brand new, I will often buy used to save a couple $100. And then after I use that camera, I might be able to recoup most of my money or make money from it if you sell it. So you have used a nice camera for a year or two. So if you can pull off those numbers, I find that like a fun game to do sometimes. Just like, can I buy this for cheap, and can I flip it and make money? That's the ultimate.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, because you and me are YouTubers too, so it's like, I mean, I just recently did this with that GH3 that I did a video on. Like, I bought it for like I think it was like $200 or something like that.
Wow.
And I made a video on it, which is making me money on YouTube. And then I sold it for more money than I paid for it. You know what I mean? So it's like,
and that content is evergreen and will live on, and it's going to generate money while you're sleeping.
Exactly. Well, cool. Hopefully those tips were beneficial. I definitely feel like what you provided was probably more what people needed to hear. Like, I just like to talk about gear too much, so that's just where my mind went. But I appreciate all your tips, because those are things that I need to like remember too.
I want to thank Nigel for having me on. It was such a blast. Be sure to check out the Long Lens podcast for the full discussion. I'll leave a link in the description down below for you to check out. Peace.